about 2 or 3 minutes. You are all on mute. There'll be kind of chances to ask questions in the session. If you have anything that kind of comes up in between, there's a chat feature which you can use to let us know.
My specs, they seem to be permanently dirty at the moment.
I'm going to record onto. Minutes past. Yeah, we'll just give it another minute or two and then we'll start. Now just finished setting up so we're streaming on YouTube as well.
I've never streamed directly onto YouTube. I've streamed on Facebook.
Yeah, we did Facebook the first time around, but now we've been trying YouTube as well. You can there is a way of doing it across them all simultaneously, but I don't know how you do that.
I also think at the moment, you know, as a non-techie, but I think from a bandwidth point of view, you just don't want to
no
end up dropping it off, because even when, you know, pre-COVID, when I used to live stream on Facebook, it can drop off. So
yeah. All right, we'll just give it just 1 more minute. So we'll have just a couple more people joining. Okay, I think we will make a start. So thank you all for joining us on this. Well, if you're in the UK, quite a sunny Wednesday afternoon. As always, as I've kind of said just previously, you are currently unmuted, but there will be chances to ask questions later on in the session. We'll kind of ask you to put in the chat, you know, I've got a question, and then we'll unmute you to ask that question. If you have any comments or questions that come to you through the session, feel free to put them on the chat, and we'll kind of explore them as we go along. And that's all from me. I'm going to pass straight over to Bethan and let her walk you through the session. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Daniel. So what I will do, once I've passed the introduction, I will stick the chat up, because I'm keen to make this as interactive as possible. Notwithstanding, obviously, we don't want it to be hugely disruptive if we get lots more people joining us as well. So we'll keep an eye on the chat. And if Daniel, if you can let me know if there's anything pertinent that I've missed, that would also be good.
Sure.
So let me just give you a little bit of background about me first. I think that'll give you a little bit of context of why I'm so passionate about this word value. So I started my whoops, let me just click on. So I started my my career 25 years ago or so now. So I graduated in the mid-90s, and I started work in the pharmaceutical industry. And as part of that role, I very much felt that I was sort of part of the healthcare solution in the UK and globally. So working in pharmaceuticals, I felt very passionate at that time. I'd done a science degree, and I knew that I was creating value for patients and communities through the work that I was doing. So I worked in everything from clinical trials to healthcare communications, market research. I did a number of different roles within the pharmaceutical industry. And then an opportunity came up to join the NHS, and it was very unusual, certainly in those days, for people to make that transition from pharmaceuticals into a sort of public sector role. And what I found really, really strange when I first made that transition was working in the National Health Service in the UK. I realised that most people, certainly at that time, didn't see the pharmaceutical industry as a partner. They didn't sort of see that they were providing healthcare services in partnership with the pharmaceutical industry. It felt very transactional. So what the NHS was doing at that time, it was working with the industry, but it was buying drugs from it. And then it was also contributing to drug trials, but it was very, very transactional. And I always felt that was a huge missed opportunity. So literally within sort of weeks of me joining the NHS, I said, you know, ultimately we're all trying to do the same thing together in terms of improving, you know, the health of patients and communities. Why don't we work far more in partnership? So what I was able to do, bringing that insight, obviously from the pharmaceutical industry, I was able to create collaborations which enabled us to work, I suppose, on challenges together. So, you know, I knew what the pharmaceutical industry needed in terms of quality of drug trials, for example, and equally, I knew that there were these really enthusiastic members of staff within the NHS, absolutely wanted to do the best thing for their patients and wanted to be at the sharp end of research and work collaboratively too. So it was about putting the two together. But what I discovered, and this is what's really relevant for today's talk, is quite often when you're working in silos, you know, within the public sector and within something like the pharmaceutical industry, and that goes for a lot of private business, you don't always talk the same language. So when you're trying to set up partnerships and work with other organisations, quite often a lot of things gets lost in translation because we very quickly default into what our products do in terms of the features that they maybe have, as opposed to the value that actually you're creating for the other partner. So I'm not here because I'm this amazing marketing specialist that, you know, that talks about value from that perspective. I'm here knowing that we have so many challenges that are facing us globally, and I don't just mean related to health, and certainly not COVID at the moment, although that will have some relevance later. But there are so many challenges that we can work with other organisations in partnership, but we just need to get a lot better at understanding what those challenges are, responding to them, and being able to articulate the value that we're creating in those scenarios. So I just wanted to create that little bit of a scene set of why this was important to me, you know. And so for the last 25 years, I've been very fortunate that I've worked in the NHS then for 16 years, worked in areas of research, innovation and industry engagement. So I was very fortunate to spend my whole time within that setting up these partnerships, not just with large organisations like pharmaceuticals, but also with small business. I realise there's absolutely talent sat in every business. Just like everyone on this call, you have got something to offer another organisation, another sector. And it's what we need is just to find ways of harnessing that. And a lot of that comes down to really understanding the value that you create. You know, even when we've got businesses that have been trading for a number of years, we don't always know the best way to express that. So what I've done since leaving the NHS, so it's nearly 4 years ago now, I have my own healthcare innovation consultancy. Not surprisingly, having worked in healthcare for the majority of my career, I've got a huge amount of insight and expertise to be able to share with people that want to work within that sector. But also, I'm sure you understand that just a lot of the principles of what we do in business, you know, whichever type of organisation we work with, can be very generic too. So the other part of my time I spend mentoring businesses, and I mentor, yes, lots of health related businesses, but lots of businesses that are non-health, a large proportion of probably tech driven businesses now, and I think obviously that's changed over the years since I got involved in this. But I still work with a lot of you know, physical product businesses and services. So I spend a lot of time now in sort of those co-working type of environments. I support a number of incubators and accelerators, but I also do a lot of work on a one-to-one basis. So when I go through value and value proposition, I do a lot of this ordinarily with you know, on a one-to-one basis. But what I've tried to do today is create something which allows you to have that sort of generic feel of how it works. But I've also a little bit later, there'll be an opportunity for us to have some one-to-one time if you'd like to also. So that's just a little bit of a scene set. But my next question is, maybe we can just pop this in the chat. What do we mean by value? So just maybe pop a few words into the chat. I'm not sure how much of a delay there often is in this coming up. I've got chat open now, but what does value mean to you? So when you create value, what does that mean? Why do you buy something? Yeah, great. So we've got real mix then. So we're talking about sort of social benefit, return on investment, solving a problem. Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't disagree with any of those things. Well, when I think about value, I think about it in absolutely something that's responding to a challenge, but I think of it as a way of creating a change for somebody. You're taking somebody on a journey from, you know, their before to somewhere else to their after, and you're providing that value. Yeah, we're still getting some really great responses on here, and I think these are really important, and it also shows, doesn't it, how one word or phrase means something different to many of us. So I think having this sort of opportunity to maybe explore value and to be able to express value, and you know, I've just seen the word benefit in there. You know, the benefits that we provide to people in the language that they understand is really, really important, because too often I think we have a habit of listing off all the features of maybe what our product or service does without connecting that in a way that other people sort of understand. Okay, so I'll just move the next slide. So as I've just said, let me just move chat out of the way. It just doesn't seem to be a way of me doing it, so it's not in the middle of my screen. Whoops, sorry. How do I go back? Okay, so as I was just saying, value is not about talking about product features. It's absolutely about talking about the change that you create for somebody. And it's very, very specific, I believe, to the customer segment or niche. And you also need to write it in the particular language for the person that you're talking to. So if I go back to my NHS example, so for probably at least 15 years, you know, when I was in the NHS, there was an open invitation for businesses to come and meet somebody like me to be able to explain what their new innovation was for the health service. It was very unusual. You know, it's the NHS is notoriously hard to penetrate. But one of the roles that I actually did within my organisation was to say, look, I appreciate that you've got talent and expertise and great products and services that we want to leverage. Please come and talk to us. And the service that I created within our own organisation, so my team, my innovation team, we worked as a little bit of a, I suppose, as a screening process. Because as you know yourself, when you go to speak to a large organisation, sometimes you only get one shot. And I wanted to ensure that businesses had the best opportunity to be able to take their product forward. And I knew that if they came in cold, if they came in with their product, not maybe fully understanding the health service, they might actually fall at the first hurdle, because they could be speaking to a senior clinician or speaking to a nurse, trying to explain what it is that their product did, but not putting it in a language that meant anything to them. And so the thing that we have to remember in the health service is ultimately most products are there to benefit the end person, so the patient, that, you know, the beneficiary. Or certainly a large proportion of products are. However, it's not the patient in our National Health Service in the UK that actually pays for it. Okay, we pay for it in our taxes, but it doesn't feel that way because it's not so transactional. So the people that we need to actually influence, the people that we need to explain of how our product benefits those patients are often, you know, maybe different members of staff, people in procurement departments. And it's not enough just to be able to explain the value that our product is creating in terminology that means something to patients. You've got to be able to talk about the value you're creating in the language that the procurement department who are buying it will understand. You know, how is it going to save us money, or how is it going to create return on investment that we currently don't have? You know, how is it going to make a nurse's life easier? How is it going to make a doctor be able to provide better care to patients? When you go, when you express the value that you're creating, you do need to modify that dependent on the audience that you're talking to. So you will always have, whatever your product or service is, it will always have a number of features, but the way that you express that which some of you will absolutely know because it'll be the way you express it, say in your marketing copy, needs to change on depending on who it is that you speak to. So the main exercise I wanted to go through today links to the business model canvas and links to value proposition. So the next quick thing I'd like to just put in chat on how many of you are familiar with firstly the business model canvas. Whoops. So here's the business model canvas. How many of you are familiar with it? So I'm having to keep moving these little screens around. Yeah. Great. So there isn't anyone that's not familiar so far. Just help me to gauge whether I need to go through any detail. Okay, so we've got RAM that's not so familiar. So just very quickly then, the business model canvas, and I know that we've had other talks in this series that have touched on this briefly. For me, this is the perfect way to keep a constant review on your business model that you've created for your own business. Some people get very, very bogged down. I think particularly when they're an early stage business, writing long business plans. Those activities are much easier when you've been able to do a snapshot of what your business model is. But the one thing a lot of people don't always appreciate, the first thing that you need to do before you delve into completing your business model canvas is to look at two of these areas first, because it makes it so much easier to do that. And the first is customer segments and the second is the value proposition. And then that's when there's another canvas. So what I didn't say actually, so just so that you know, those of you that aren't familiar, so business model generation is one book. Sorry, it's flipped in the screen. But the canvases are both referred to in the business model generation book. So that's Alex Ostrander. And they've also got a value proposition design book as well. So the templates that I'm talking about are in these books, but believe me, they're so widely used, and you can see the strategizer.com link on the bottom. There are so many resources on the internet that you can actually access to do this. But I just really wanted to give you sort of a whistle stop, also a practical insight into how to use some of these things. So that you can just be in a very quick way elicit the value that you're creating and doing it on a regular basis as well. So the majority of you say you're familiar with the business model canvas. How many of you are familiar with the value proposition canvas? So I don't want to make an assumption that you're familiar with both. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a mix, which I find quite fascinating in some ways. I must admit, it was business model canvas that I was introduced to first, and value proposition probably later. I'd imagine that the book was generated later, but personally now, my starting point before ever touching a business model canvas is to look at value proposition. And I'll just very quickly show you the template for that next. Let me just move the chat again. Okay, so if you see value proposition and customer segment that I've circled here, and this is the value proposition canvas. So this one doesn't have the labels on it, but basically this one's the value proposition and this one is customer segments. And what the column is here, I presume you can see my little, can you see my mouse moving? So the first column, we start over on the right and we move left. So on the right here, we have something, a segment called customer jobs. So that, and I'll give you some practical examples on here. So these are the things that our customers are doing, and to what extent you actually review this, or to what extent you write down everything that they do is up to you. You can keep it quite simple, or you can literally, with some of the business I mentor, we literally deep dive into thinking about everything that the ideal customer does and list it all down so we don't miss things. And then this segment down here is the pain. So we think, okay, these are the jobs that they want, that they desire to do well. These are the pains that they're experiencing when they're in their day-to-day. And these don't have to be just sort of functional things. This could be social, emotional, you can actually be quite wide when you think of some of the pains that your customers go through. And then the segment at the top are the things they gain. So these are the things that your customers gain when they're working well. And again, I'll give you a practical example in a minute so you can see what we mean here. And then the value proposition is actually in the box here. So the corresponding segments are, so this one that's got like a little pill in here, this is the pain reliever. So these are the things that we are creating in our business to take the pains away from our customers. And then the segment at the top, these are the gain creators. So again, when we better understand all the gains that our ideal customers are trying to create, these are the things that we can create to allow that to happen. And then once we have an understanding of the way that we're creating gains and pain relief for our customers, this is where our products and services get created. So you can imagine if you can go through this exercise with your individual customer segments. So like when I mentioned before, you know, if you're somebody that's got a healthcare product, you don't just want to be thinking about the end patient that might benefit from that product, but then you think about, okay, let's put one of my customer segments down as somebody in the procurement team, somebody that's buying my product. Or then you could maybe put a nurse or a doctor. You can go through and literally do this through all your customer segments and really get an idea of the way that your product or service could respond to it. And what's interesting about this exercise, theoretically, you know, you could start with a blank sheet of paper. You could drill down to some, you know, there may be somebody, I don't know at the moment, particularly when you're thinking about what's going on in our society, there may be a particular customer group that you feel you might want to benefit. You could actually start with a blank sheet of paper, do a deep dive and try to really understand that individual customer group, write down their pains and gains and design a product or service from this point. But the way I tend to use this with my clients, I tend to do it where we're doing it more as a review. So they're already providing a product or service. You know, a number of you will already have businesses that are doing something, but you can go back through, you can use it to see whether you're missing anything, to see whether you can tweak something, to see whether actually some pains are being experienced that you've not really responded to by your product or service. So this can be used at any point. And I've yet to find a business, you know, literally from large ones down to small ones where this is not useful at any point. It's always really useful to go and revisit it. So I think it's a great way maybe for somebody who considers themselves, you know, maybe a young entrepreneur that wants to think, right, okay, I really want to help that group, but I don't know what it is I want to do, right through to being able to review something that you're already creating. So does that make sense so far? Yeah, I'm looking at Daniel nodding. Is there anyone else that I'm relying on you, Daniel, so don't keep pulling up the chat, that let me know if there's anyone that needs to explain a bit more. So what I want to do is go through a real life example, because the way I would ordinarily do this, I would actually do it as a live example. You know, I do this a lot on a one-to-one basis or one-to-group basis, where we literally go through and I get somebody to talk me through everything that they feel that their ideal customers experiencing, all of those pains and gains. So I'm just going to take you through one example. And what I've chosen, I've actually been a bit cheeky, and I've chosen a business accelerator, because I thought for the majority of us, some of us will already have a relationship with Birmingham Enterprise Community, who are obviously hosting this this webinar series. Some of you might not, but you might have a bit of a curiosity about them. But hopefully it'll be something that you can maybe relate to. So I'm just doing an example here of, okay, this is the value proposition, or some of the value propositions that Birmingham Enterprise Community are creating, and very particularly for their early stage companies they support. So that's a very particular customer segment of theirs. So the first place to start is we think about, okay, if you think about their ideal customer, their ideal early startup that maybe wants to join an accelerator, and what's I think very unusual about Birmingham Enterprise Community is this isn't just for tech startups. So the majorities of accelerators and incubators out there for tech startups, what's quite exciting about this is that we've got an opportunity for non-tech businesses to have that same benefit. So, you know, everything I'm talking about here is not specific to tech. So if we look at these customer jobs, I've just selected 3 jobs that a typical startup will be experiencing. So early stage business, Well, the main thing they're doing on a day-to-day basis is just running their business, setting it up and running their business. So all of the usual activities that will be involved in that. So as I mentioned before, when you do this sort of exercise, I go into it with people I support at a very, very granular level. So we would literally be listing out all of the things that they do on a day-to-day basis, you know, their accounting, their stock control, all of the detail, just to really get into the shoes of that customer. And what you also have to, what you'll also discover when you try to do this and you don't know your customer well, you're going to draw blanks and you're going to go, oh, I'm not sure what else they do. And that's also going to be an indicator. Go and have a conversation. You know, businesses aren't created by sitting in a dark room on your own. You need to go out and speak to people, speak to your ideal customers and really get under their skin and understand what it is that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So when we think about, okay, they're running a business, think of all the tasks they're doing there. The other thing that a typical early stage business that wants to join an incubator or accelerator is doing, they want to be successful. And for them, success is about growth and sustainability. So you could argue that's another thing that is on their list of jobs. You know, because don't forget, these are not just functional jobs, these are emotional and social ones. So they can be very wide. The other thing that an early stage companies do want to experience is ongoing learning. So I think it's probably fair to say every early stage company that wants to join an incubator or accelerator will have those three things on their plate, amongst other things. And then as a bit of an example of some of the pains they'll be experiencing at that time, so I've just put three here. As a startup, you often don't know what you don't know, and you don't know where to go for that, you know, for those gaps to be filled. So it's one pain that you'll be experiencing. Because you're running a business, you're also very short of time and resource. You know, particularly at the early stage, it might just be you, might be another couple of people. Another pain they're experiencing is you spend a lot of time, and it's related to the last one, working in your business and not on your business. You're not looking at it strategically, you know, you're looking at it, how do I literally get from day to day to day? And I haven't got time to be thinking about the bigger picture. But the gains, and so this is the other thing to be thinking about when you step into the shoes of these people, is when things are going well. So what does that feel like? So thinking, okay, you know, what would the ideal scenario be? Okay, they'll be attracting income, sales, or getting some investment. They'll be growing their workforce and capacity. They're going to be evidence that they're scaling their business at pace. You know, they're not just growing organically, maybe, that they're really moving at pace. And also, you know, remember, you know, let's link it to some of the emotional things. They'll be confident. They'll be confident that they're doing the right thing. I think all of us have experienced, any one of us that's running a business, it's always, you know, we all feel like imposters at different times. And it's just nice to feel confident in the right environment that we're doing the right thing, or certainly the best we can be doing. So, you know, that's, I suppose, a typical snapshot of an early stage company wanting to access an accelerator. So then if we look at the other side, and if we think, then you can start to see how, if that's all you knew, that would be okay. Because what you could start to do is go, well, okay, then how do we what can we do to take some of this pain away? Or what can we do to create some of these gains for this business and this individual? So if we think about what some of the pain relievers look like on this side, okay, you don't know what you don't know. Okay, so what we'll do, part of our value proposition, is we're going to give you access to an expert network. So that's obviously something that an accelerator will do. We're going to help you fill your knowledge gaps. You know, we know how to set up a business. So instead of you worrying that, you know, there's probably 10 or 12 things I should be doing and I only know about 2 of them, we're going to tell you what they are. We're also going to put them into a structured program of activity. So, you know, a lot of accelerators do cohort the companies and actually take them through that structured program. And because you're all working alongside of each other, that does bring some economies of scale. You'll be able to access some resources that you can't actually do maybe when you're on your own. And so before you know it, some of these pains are being addressed, and they're being addressed by the service provision of the accelerator. And then if we have a look at the gains on the other side, so if you think about, okay, what are the gain creators? Okay, we're going to give you access to potential investors, because, you know, there are lots of investors out there with money that they're willing to invest in our business. But if I was an investor, I would be far more confident in investing, knowing that a business that I was interested in was already going through some sort of structured program. They'd been through a level of due diligence, joining an incubator or an accelerator. You know, there's some brand association. They may be part of the network where some of your peer investors are involved in, you know. So these are the sorts of things that you can really, or an accelerator can really contribute to, you know. So if you've got this desire of attracting income, you know, it's obviously going to be something that an accelerator can provide. You can also potentially access a pool of talented individuals. You know, quite often what we do see happening in accelerators, so, you know, you've got this challenge over here, you want to be growing your workforce capacity. Sometimes you realise that the talent you're trying to attract is actually one of the other businesses in your cohort. You know, there's a lot of knowledge exchange or, you know, resource exchange that can happen. Never mind the fact that in these environments or in a service like this, they will be able to introduce you to lots of other companies and wider parts of the network. Another thing that accelerators can do, so if you talk about, you know, one of the things you want to have is evidence of scale. Accelerators are very good, often part of their program, ensuring that you know how to measure your impact. You know, lots of businesses could be trading for as long as, say, 12 months sometimes, and other than financially, they often don't know the impact they're creating because they've not taken the time to understand how to measure value. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this, again, is something that an accelerator can do. And so once all of these things have been plotted down, it's no great surprise to actually understand that what Birmingham Enterprise Community have done, they've created an accelerator programme which takes all of these factors into consideration. And they've also, although obviously it's limited at the moment, they're part of a co-working environment. So what, and apologies Daniel, I literally have just done a snapshot, there's so obviously more in terms of involved in an accelerator, but what I wanted you to be able to very quickly see that when you're able to plot down the pains and gains of your ideal customer, very quickly you can start to think about how you address each of those and what that could then mean in terms of a product or service. So I'm just going to pause there. Is that clear in terms of how you would complete a value proposition canvas? Just pop that again in the chat. I can't see the chat at the moment, but
a lot of yeses at the moment.
Yeah.
If anybody has any specific questions at this point, please do let us know.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, great. So now I've explained that, I can just go then probably into the next the next step here. Right. So I wanted to just show how, you know, that last slide could absolutely have been used when the accelerator was started up. But you can imagine when things happen, like lockdown, you know, and you've suddenly got a situation where a lot of what the enterprise community has been about has been face to face. It's a really good time to go back and have a look at, you know, what that might mean for that customer segment. So again, it's this early stage group of companies, but there've been some subtle changes in here. You know, for example, when I'm thinking about, you know, think about some of the businesses that are out there at the moment. Before it was about, you know, how can I be successful? How can I grow my business? A lot of it is about survival at the moment. You know, they're having to run their business, but actually in their head, it's more about survival, maybe rather than growth, about sustainability. It's not to say that those things won't ever come back, but actually, you know, when you're thinking about how you connect with those customers and you know, I was talking about before, the language you might need to start to use with those customers when you're trying to talk to them, you need to bear this in mind. So there'll be some common things that won't have changed. You know, they've got knowledge gaps, there's the ongoing learning. You know, I've put some new stickies on here. There's no one-to-one contact possible anymore. That's a massive pain. You know, they're probably even more short of time and resources. When we look at some of the gains, they might express it slightly different. They might be thinking it's not necessarily about immediate scalability, but they still want to be thinking about how they scale. It's about survival post-COVID. What income looks like might be slightly different. But then, therefore, once you start to maybe, well, it's not maybe, when you do step into your customer's shoes, in this new world, even if it's just, you know, short to medium term, it certainly is, you know, things have changed. What you can then do is think about how your product or service, you know, how your business responds to that. So the immediate things that that this accelerator have done is obviously, I've seen an increase of pool of mentors. I don't know whether that was deliberate, but if you think about, you know, when resources are stretched, to be able to have actually even more experts around has been really important. Online provision has been absolutely significant. And I think it's important to point out these things aren't a given. Not every business has decided to go online. Not every business has decided to continue to support its client base by going online. You know, some people for very valid reasons are furloughed all of their staff. Some people have said, actually, we're not going to continue. We're going to, you know, take a bit of stock or take a few weeks to decide how best to do things. We're not going to be reactive, you know, and there isn't a right or wrong. It's just a different way of doing it. But I think when you're using, you know, a tool like this, just to be able to take stock, maybe have a think about how you'd want to respond to some of these new pains and gains is definitely valuable. And so what's happened immediately has been, there's been a new product, and that's this webinar series. You know, the REFRAME opportunity to be able to access learning like this online has been introduced as a result of being able to do less on a face-to-face basis, which is obviously hugely valuable. So again, just a little snapshot to show how things change. So before we move on, any more questions?
Yeah, so David said here, how does a luxury product relate to the value proposition canvas? Luxury is the worst thing to be into during a pandemic. My startup is a limited edition sculpture for a niche market.
That's a very good question. And I suppose I've got a bit of an example later, but I can bring this up later. I've noticed, and I know this is, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar. I've noticed the beauty industry doing one of two things. So I've got a number of friends that are involved in selling beauty products online. You know, there are people that are doing maybe things like Avon or Unique. There's loads and loads of different online sort of beauty products. And I've noticed some of them are literally continuing with all of the same messaging that they were before. So they're all saying, you know, which mascara would you like to try? Which this would you like to try? You know, and it's all, and literally the sales patter, for want of a better word, all of the marketing they use is exactly the same as it would be if they were trying to sell somebody that's going out every Saturday night, or maybe using a product for in the week. I personally have started to sort of ignore that, because I thought, God, are you really that naive that you don't think my world has changed? Why would I be buying products that are not relevant to me anymore? However, what other people have done is they've started to pull on my heartstrings in terms of maybe trying to sell me that product based on my well-being. The fact that actually one of the things that's really good at a time like this, particularly maybe when you're doing things online, you know, they talk about from a well-being perspective, don't stay in your pajamas all day, get up, get dressed as if you're going to work, you know, do all the go through some of the routines that would be really normal for you to improve your well-being. So they've absolutely modified their language to buying exactly the same product, but in a way that's much, so they're not having to change their product in any shape or form, but the way they're marketing to me has changed. So I'm just trying to think, you know, and maybe a luxury product like you describe falls outside of this. But presumably there will be people, you know, if this is sculpture, for example, that would improve the look or feel of your home, that would look at the look or feel of your garden, you need to appeal to people who are literally at that point where they're ready to improve their environment. You know, some people have absolutely still got the same income coming in that they used to before. I think we have to accept there are a number of people that don't. you know, and I think we have to be sympathetic to that and not try and ram the, you know, certain messaging down certain customer groups' throats. But I think there will be people that are still buying some of the higher end luxury products, but for maybe a slightly different reason, you know. So it's not, so I would just say with any product, is just have a look at your messaging, try and step into the shoes of your ideal customer. They're still there. You know, you could even go back to speak to some of the people that have purchased from you before and understand how their purchasing habits are, you know, are changing, how it feels to be them, you know, and be honest, say, I'm just looking to understand whether somebody like you would ever be buying another product like this from me, you know, at this time, or is it something that you would only ever be wanting to buy, you know, when we weren't going through this at a, you know, in this sort of COVID time. But has that answered the question? I know it's difficult, but I think what it isn't always about, it's not about changing your product always. It's about communicating differently and communicating in a way that's really empathetic to the person that you're connecting and selling to.
Yeah, David said that's helpful. There's another question coming from Ram, who said, how do you get stakeholders to open up about how they would ideally do things better when sometimes they are so entrenched in what is wrong?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. I mean, one of the things that I did when I worked in the NHS, I worked with two groups. I worked internally with our staff, trying to understand their challenges, because you can understand it was probably far easier for them to share their challenges and the things that they may be struggling with somebody internally. So then I was in a position to be able to share some of those challenges externally with other organisations. So what you will find in particularly large organisations, there are some parts that have a better understanding, and it's not always about going to frontline staff to understand challenge and need. The other thing that's really important, just because somebody has a problem, it doesn't always mean they're prepared to pay for the solution. So one of the things that I was always really passionate about within the NHS is it's all very well for a company to, I don't know, speak to, it's going to probably sound a bit derogatory, and I don't mean it in that way, but to speak to a nursing friend in a pub and go, right, okay, you know, tell us your problems, tell us in an ideal world, you know, which problems you'd like solving. The reality is that nurse or that individual might not have any influence on actually the purchasing power of an organisation, and they might not fully appreciate that, you know, the thing that they would love to be solved on a day-to-day basis is not something that would ever be prioritised over something else. So it's always really important that you understand, you know, not only sort of the challenges that organisations are experiencing, but also what they are prepared to pay for. And one of the best ways I would advise to do this is to work with somebody that works very close with that sector. You know, it's no surprise that lots of businesses work with me, because I know a lot of people within the healthcare sector. My network is very strong, people in healthcare. And so it's often people that are close to those individuals where you can have some of those very honest and candid conversations. In addition, there are lots of other, entities that are starting to, I mean, these are what hacks are about ultimately, aren't they? You know, where you get other organisations that bring together organisations and businesses that have challenges with the people that can solve them. So there are lots of those sorts of discussions happening, particularly at the moment. I mean, it's a bit overwhelming working in healthcare and COVID. Everything is about COVID. Everything's about, you know, short-term, medium-term and long-term improvements. But, you know, there are lots of go-to people. You just need to sort of know ultimately where those sit. And I think that's where accelerators and incubators in particular are really good at being able to match you to people that can maybe give you access to some of that honest conversation. Does that help? Again, looking at Daniel again. Whoops.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, great. And so this was just related to what I was saying before. It isn't always about changing your product or adding more features into your products or services. It's sometimes just about modifying your message and making it relevant to your customers now. The next thing I wanted to talk about was, so this was a model that was actually shared in a webinar last week or the week before, and it's from Steve Blank's book, Lean Startup. And it talks about, you know, when you've got a lean startup, how you ensure that you continually, you know, when you're building new features, you need to be measuring their impact, learning from them, rebuilding, da, 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 da. The big thing is, you know, for lots of us, what do we mean by measure? And measuring can really be as simple as asking for feedback. So we'll make sure that you've got access to this deck after, because, you know, these are just some of the things that I think it's really important to capture. So, you know, it doesn't matter what type of business you are. I mean, you obviously can slightly rephrase these questions, but when you ask for feedback, rather than, you know, it's a bit like the other alternative. Quite a lot of people ask their customers for testimonials. Can you just send me a testimonial, please? The problem with it just saying, you know, send me a testimonial, it's really hard without any specific questions for that person to sit down and write it. So it often takes a bit longer than you anticipate. But also, it doesn't always elicit the information that you actually want to better understand, that could change the way in which you develop your product or service in future. So all I've done here is sort of given you a series of questions, and I've got 3 slides of this on, just to maybe ask for a little bit more information than you ordinarily would. So everything from why they even came to you in the first place, how was your product or service discovered, you know, taking Birmingham Enterprise Community, you know, how do people even find out that there's an accelerator in Birmingham they can apply to and then make an application? You know, I don't know, Daniel, if you even know that. You know, I would love to know how people get to understand it. You know, never mind for understanding if your marketing's working, but just, you know, what's their starting point? You know, how did you come across the work? How did you hear about my product or service? And then this is really important. One of the things that I talked about before, when you want to understand the value that you're making for somebody, you've got to somehow capture their starting point, the baseline, the bit that they were doing before they even met you. So you need to be asking questions like, what challenge were you facing in your business or personally? You know, again, in healthcare, what challenge were you experiencing? You know, before we were working together, and how were you feeling about it? You know, was it something you were just sort of living with, or was it something that's keeping you awake at night? You know, really drill down and start to understand what that baseline was, and then get a bit of a feel for the competition. You know, ask the question, you know, had you previously tried to solve the problem or challenge? If yes, what do you do? If not, you know, why not? So just start to, you know, frame a series of questions that drill a little bit more. Next set, to understand how the value of your product was perceived. You know, why did you decide to purchase our product? What were the determining factors? And then importantly, once you've got all of that sort of before picture, I mean, in an ideal world, you want to capture this really early on when you're working with the business. And if you're working, you know, more of a sort of B2C type environment where you're working with, you know, maybe thousands of customers, you could be doing this in the process of surveys or whatever it might be. You know, but obviously if you're working B2B, you can even be doing this on a very, very personal level. So once you've collected all of that sort of before picture, then it's really understanding, okay, what were the results and outcomes of us working together? You know, what have been the 3 main results, and you know, how have we impacted on what you do? How do you now feel? You know, the reason some of these questions are worth talking about is when you're trying to explain to somebody else, you know, the value you create for them, you don't necessarily always want to be talking about it in that very factual way. You want to be talking at a feelings level as well. So elicit from them how they then feel about the challenge they're originally facing, and how your the product that has been purchased has sort of helped, and right through to, would you recommend me or our product to anyone, and if so, who and why? And the reason this is really important is quite often, you know, when our customers are using our products, we will see a potential for them to be used in ways that we never ever appreciated before, and these are the sorts of questions where they start to share that. You know, quite often I've said to some of the people I buy services from, oh my goodness, yeah, not only would I use your product, but I also think it could be used in this sector or that sector or another sector. Have you ever considered that? You know, but unless somebody asked me some of those specific questions, it wouldn't occur to me to share that. A nice way of doing this is also, you know, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be too long-winded. It could also be asking people, you know, those questions, but just say, can you put it in 3 words? You know, use 3 words to describe the product, and then, okay, how would you describe it now? Very, very simple, but I think these are just, it sounds so obvious, but it is amazing how often this is missed. All of the businesses I work with, I sort of ask for this sort of level of information when I'm working with them, and I'm very surprised how little people ask their customers for feedback. So I'm just going to pause there for a second, just check if there's any more questions. Sorry, keep flicking this.
Yes, we do have another question. So Mohammed has said, would giving a client a template for feedback retract any authenticity in their feedback?
I suppose there's different. It depends which way you're looking at it. So it's no great surprise that lots of businesses use market research companies, are there? You know, I've done one recently. I was given a new Hoover to use. It was great because I got to keep the Hoover after as well. But it's a market research company that's coming and asking all those questions about what I thought about it. So, you know, the level of independence is there in terms of not maybe sending leading questions. But I think for the majority of us, particularly in early stage businesses, it's absolutely fine to be asking some of these questions directly. If you look at the questions I put here, these aren't leading questions. They're just asking for, you know, slightly more feedback than can you send me a testimonial would do. It is also what you do with that. I mean, what I'm not is a tech specialist telling you from a lean startup perspective how to measure the impact of what you do. You know, there are lots of other people that are able to do that. What I think I'm trying to help you to understand at the moment, that the more information you can get from your existing customers to help inform the value that you're creating that you might have missed. So I'm amazed when I did this myself, I was amazed at the things that people said to me and I'd missed it. So some of the stuff that I thought was, you know, oh, just something I just did seems to be the difference that makes the difference. You know, being accessible, I don't know, on Zoom at a time when maybe people weren't doing things online. People go, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful to be able to do that. I'm so grateful for the fact I can contact you on WhatsApp. I think, doesn't everyone do that? You know, so unless you send the slightly more targeted questioning, I just don't understand how you ever be able to elicit that. So I'm not sure how that fully answers the question, but is that okay? Yeah,
then there was just some, David had put responded to the question as well, saying depends on the template. Don't try and control the answers too much. Yes. So I guess having that, but not kind of forcing them down a particular avenue with the answers.
It's not leading it. And also, you know, I'm up for learning. If, for example, anyone's using some of these questions that I've put together and they feel they're too leading, you know, that's great. Let me know. And it's something that I certainly need to modify. I think these are questions have certainly worked for my type of business, and I'm not a massive business, you know, I'm a consultancy ultimately. So these are the sorts of questions that work really well for me, but just use them as a starting point and keep modifying them, because you're right, what you don't want to do is, we don't want to get back what we want to hear, if that makes sense. It's really important you get honest feedback. Any more questions? I can see it's flicking a little bit.
No, just to some question. Somebody else had agreed then with what David said. Adil has said that he just gets his clients to leave reviews on Trustpilot and finds that works really well in terms of gathering some feedback.
Yeah, Trustpilot's great, but what I do when people ask me for feedback, I actually go through my own questions. So
you answer your questions.
I answer my questions. So what I do to make sure that I give something really valuable on Trustpilot or Google or whatever, I actually say, I came to so-and-so. So I've done it with my web developer, for example. I came to so-and-so because I want, you know, this is my starting point. I didn't know where to da-da-da-da. So you literally tell the story of why you chose them right through to what they delivered for you. So that's what I tend to do. So I think you're absolutely right. Doing it on those platforms is the ideal place to be doing it.
Yeah. And then Elroyd had a comment as well saying, templates showcase the controlled nature of a feed, whereas just letting them critically tell you what they like or not. However, you could specifically feature questions, but not necessarily use a template. I guess there's, from my perspective, sometimes times that you want in terms of your marketing to know a particular thing. So for us, obviously we're big on community, and we believe a lot of the things that we do the best things that we do are the fact that we, bring that community together. So naturally, when we ask people, okay, what do you like about us, or why do you get us to help you? Although we wouldn't say you need to say this, we would want, when we put marketing materials together, to get that across.
Yeah.
But again, it's getting that balance right, and not saying, okay, you have to say this. You just got to let them provide that feedback.
Yeah, and some people actually do like the scope of giving, in that sort of environment, that open testimonial, and that's fine. But the main thing is that you get it, because what I often say is the value you create is out there in people's heads. But if you don't ask them, you don't know it. So I work with somebody that has done an amazing job. She's been her business has been working with hundreds of people online. And she felt she'd pivoted her business away from something that she originally wanted to create value on. And I said, but hundreds of people are going through your online course. Are you not capturing what they're now doing with that information? Because I said, your impact is scaling beyond, anything you imagined. And she said, well, people do sort of anecdotally tell me. I said, ask them, don't just wait for anecdotes, because she's getting amazing anecdotal feedback. I said, go and ask some more specific questions. And I said, I think you'll be amazed at the impact your business is making, because ultimately that's why you do what you do, isn't it? To create impact.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, great. So what I've just done as a bit of a sort of a follow-up note, so I suppose it slightly picks up on what you just said, Daniel. So I don't know whether you've even thought about this, and maybe I'd be being a bit unfair exposing it on here. But, when you think about the accelerator that you run, your primary customer are the businesses that you support. But I would also say one of your customer segments, the mentors. And, and we don't just mentor for altruistic reasons, And so I think when you sort of step in our shoes, and I've just sort of showed it on this example, we've got a number of us have got expertise, which is, a mixture of general and specialist. We've got a day job, we own our own business, so we've got the insight we get from that. Some of us are non-exec directors, some of us are employees. Not everybody, runs their own business. Majority of us will have a thriving network. But some of the pains that we have is that we've got limited time, but a real desire to help. We don't always know how best to access people that can get our expertise, and we certainly don't know which programs to support, because there's gazillions of them out there. But actually, the gains that we have from doing this and working successfully with an accelerator or an incubator is that our expertise gets put to use, we use time effectively, we make an impact, reduce time wasting. And the only reason I've put this up here now, after the asking for feedback, I'm pretty sure as a mentor, nobody has ever asked for my feedback. And this isn't just, for Birmingham Enterprise. I've been a mentor on a lot of incubators. And nobody ever asks for feedback as if we're a customer. And I'm pretty sure you'd be amazed if you did. And the way that you can continue to create value for us as a sort of as a network in our own right, and to ensure that we're constantly learning and responding to the companies that we're trying to support would be immense. So I've just sort of thrown that in there really about the importance of appreciating customer segments, not as a criticism of this accelerator, but just to show how even when, the role that we do for this incubator is not paid. I have done I am paid to be a mentor, but this is a voluntary role, and, I really enjoy doing it. But there are so many reasons to do it, and so many reasons to remain sort of motivated. And I'm also very grateful for some of the ways the accelerator makes it easy for me. So I've just put there, for example, the fact I can share my expertise in a very flexible way by doing it online. This is much more flexible than having to, travel to a building always. The fact that you can keep us connected as a network, using Slack and things like that. And I've left lots of gaps because this wasn't the point of the exercise, but it was just to sort of show when we ask for feedback, we get so much more than we probably realise is happening in our businesses.
Yeah, I just wanted to add in there, I think we always try and look at it as whether it's with customers, whether it's partners, suppliers, whoever it is, what that two-way relationship looks like. And that's, again, brings it back to value, is what value are they providing to you? So obviously, as you mentioned here, you know, our mentors provide an immense value to our customers, but then what value do we provide back to the mentors? And that doesn't necessarily have to be a financial value, it can be other things.
Yeah, I mean, for example, one of the game creators I've put on here is a mentor peer network.
Yeah.
You know, I'm part of the Association of Business Mentors, but not every mentor is, you know, so I'm already part of a number of mentor networks, but lots of people aren't, you know, and how else do you learn and grow as a mentor? So I think there's, you know, there's so much, and not very many accelerators, I would say, facilitate that as much as this one. So I just thought it was worth throwing in. So there we go. Then the next bit is what I was sort of saying before, is about capturing that before and after. You know, I think it'd be very easy to say, you know, and it's up to you how you want to express the value. If you think, if you're a business that's allowing somebody to transform from somebody on the left to somebody on the right, you know, you could just express the value you create is about weight loss, or you could talk about, you know, your jeans fitting more comfortably, or whatever it might be. But unless you somehow capture the before picture, you cannot measure the after picture. You know, I mean, something like this is obviously very, very visual, but a lot of what we do in our business is not visual. We cannot capture it on a photo. So we need to find a way of capturing it. And I have worked with a number of startups over the last 12 months that have launched their product and just said, oh, I just want to launch it and give it a go. And I've gone, but how will you know whether it's successful? Giving things a go is great, and you'll probably get some lovely anecdotal feedback that, you know, my product was launched and people liked it. But I said, but so what? How are you going to be able to express to somebody new the value you've created if you've not measured what their starting point was and what your product or service has helped them gain, you know, the value at the end of it? So it's just to really highlight that point, really. You have to capture, you have to measure the change that you create for people. Measuring the change you create for people is measuring the value ultimately. Okay. Right, and then I just want to do a very quick snapshot. You know, we've talked about everything now about the sort of the value that businesses create, but when I work with businesses, I also do quite a lot of work with individual founders and talk about their value, because I don't know whether you know, how many people you work with, or certainly I work with a number of individuals that have had more than one business. So they might have been employed by somebody at some point in their career. They might have had 2 or 3 startups. Some of them might have not been, you know, have gone as well as they would have liked. They may be looking for, you know, another new opportunity. And sometimes people lose sight of the value that they are creating themselves, and the way they take that value into different environments. And I'm often amazed when I work with people that I thought I knew reasonably well when we do some of these sorts of exercises, of how actually when you think about the value you're creating as an individual based on some of the roles that you do for people, you know, so you can think about, okay, what am I famous for within my peer group, you know, what do people know about me in a sort of business level and stuff. That there are ways of eliciting that. So I just really wanted to highlight, don't lose yourself sometimes in some of these exercises. It's not always about measuring the value your business is putting into the world. You know, you as an individual are massively valuable to someone. And I think you just need to remind yourself of that sometimes, particularly in these times when we're very isolated. I think a bit of a morale booster, if nothing else, sometimes it's to sort of revisit and make sure that you appreciate the value that you individually create. And this is particularly pertinent when I work with, as a mentor, with people that are employed, because, you know, they're not the founders of the business, but they are providing masses of value to that business, but they lose sight of that quite often. So that's just something I just wanted to quickly highlight. And then I think we're probably just gone over the hour, but I'm still you know, available for more questions. But I just wanted to put on the final slide, you know, just a link to my website. But more importantly, if anyone wants to have follow-up conversations with me on this particular Calendly link, you can book 30-minute slots. So, you know, if you want to go through anything in more detail that we've talked about, I'm absolutely happy to, you know, you can go through a value proposition that you want to, or look at a particular customer segment, or talk a little bit more about how to access your ideal customers. You know, what I'm probably known for in the wider world, more so than healthcare innovation, is about making connections and collaboration. you know, it's something that's very sort of fundamental to what I do, and I know a lot of people. So if there's anything that you want to pick my brains on, you know, please go ahead. I think the calendar runs right the next 60 days or so, so please do just go and book a slot. But I'm absolutely fine to take questions now if you want to.
Lovely. If anybody's got any questions, please just let us know in the chat, please.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just
So Elroy said, I understand that's it. Hang on. I'm going to unmute Elroy. I think that's going to be easier. Elroy?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So, Bethan, I understand that it's fair to not ask for specific feedback for your product or service. So, what could one do to get over that obstacle? Because I think everyone is in the MVP process where they are constantly testing what their product is based on the feedback of the customer. And as you said, sometimes these guys, they don't ask for feedback. So, what could one do to get over that fear of asking for feedback to constantly improve their product?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've even known what some people do in that scenario. They've buddied up with people. And what I mean by that is they've actually, they found somebody that can benefit from their service, who also, I'm trying to express this in a clear way. So they sort of make a pact that they're both going to give each other feedback on the other's business, if that makes sense. So
okay.
just to get used to sort of breaking down the barrier and thinking, well, I buy a service from you, you buy a service from me, or theoretically we can do. Let's give each other's feedback on it. So it feels a little less scary sometimes to even do it as a bit of a practice. But what I would always say in this scenario, if you can do it once, you get over that fear. It's a bit like, you know, when you've got to make a difficult phone call, it's never as bad as you think it is. You know, so I think the other thing I would also say, one, you know, massive incentive for asking for feedback is there is nothing worse than getting your business, you know, going down the wrong path with your business and wasting a lot of time developing a feature that is not as important as you think it is to your customer. So, you know, I've done it before. It's very easy, isn't it? I don't know, to maybe, it can be as simple as some businesses don't really need a website, and you can spend a huge amount of money thinking that all of these people are going to go on your website and go on your blog and do this, that and the other. And actually, no, you could be just using social media in a different way. You know, there are so many questions that we have around our business. There are so many ways that our customers perceive value. And that could just be totally at odds with the way that we perceive things to be. So I think it's, you know, it's being courageous. You know, I use the word courage a lot. I think you just have to be courageous and ask the questions. And, you know, and if it's not possible to, you know, get over that fear and buddy up with somebody, as I talked about before, get somebody else to ask those questions. Get a friend to say, could, you know, would you mind going and getting this feedback for me? You'd be really surprised what people are prepared to do in this sort of early stage scenario where you're wanting to get feedback, if it's actually just fear of having that conversation, because you shouldn't be fearful of what response you get, because it's going to be very, very valuable.
Thank you.
Yeah, has that helped, Elroy?
Yeah, that's helped. Yeah, definitely.
Lovely. Thank you, Elroy. So the next question is from Mubasha. So Mubasha, you with us?
My mic's not working properly. Apologies.
We can hear you.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask. So I wrote it down here. How would you articulate your value when writing an application, for example?
Okay, so what do you mean by applications? Funding application?
Yeah, like funding applications. So for example, at the moment, I'm doing the funding application for that business grant from the government.
The Innovate UK grant.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the best ways, and actually this is something I meant to talk about in the main thing, is how we demonstrate our value, how we show our value. Some of the best ways, but it obviously relies on the fact that you've already got some experience, is sharing case studies and, you know, giving examples and saying, you know, I've worked with people and we've taken them from A to B, or, you know, this is the feedback that I've had, you know, and that's another great reason for getting testimonials or feedback. You can include those in these sorts of things. But I think it's how you demonstrate your value is really important. I mean, one of the things that some people have struggled with in the past, so for example, businesses that have wanted to maybe break into healthcare, but they've only ever worked in the leisure industry, I said, that's fine. You know, go to the healthcare organisation, but being able to show the case studies of how you've created change within the leisure industry. You know, use them as examples. Don't just go and don't articulate things, you know, as if you're starting with a blank sheet of paper. So thinking about your business, you know, okay, you might be wanting to apply it now into a new, you know, say the social care sector where you've only ever done it in construction. That's absolutely fine. You can, as long as you've got those examples of, you know, the before and after. Oh, you know, this was a sector, or this is an organisation that was never able to get any locum staff, for example, and now this is what we've allowed to actually happen. People will join the dots. It's far better to put it in than it will be not to give that example.
Okay, thank you. That was really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. And if you want, you know, you know, I know we've talked before. If ever you want to just find a way of doing that concisely, you know, just bang me a paragraph in WhatsApp or on Slack, and I'll help edit it. And that's another thing I try to do, is take something that can be perceived as quite complex and make it very simple. So, you know, I spend a lot of time editing applications. That's not a problem. Cool.
I'll hit you up on that offer tomorrow, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Cheers, Bash. And then another question from Ram. Ram, would you like to ask your question? Oh, maybe not. So the question they typed, Ram typed, was, what is the value of social media feedback, i.e. like to social media updates, etc.?
I'm assuming, does he mean, you know, the fact that you might put something and then you get likes on it, and how valuable is that feedback? I don't know, social media is a funny one for me. You know, I think it's a fantastic way of connecting with people. I'm not a social media expert, you know, I use it a huge amount. What social media is good, I suppose, it's another platform to collect feedback. But how much you want to be collecting on an open forum versus something else. I mean, again, there's loads of people that are far more expert than I am in terms of being able to, you know, get that value from social media platforms.
That's okay. I'll unmute it.
All right. Okay.
Hang on.
Yeah. Hopefully, Ram, you can give me a bit more context. I'm not waffling.
You should.
Yeah.
There we go.
Bit of a technical difficulty there. Yeah. First and foremost, Bethan, thanks for taking the time to do this webinar for all of us. I think we've all gained quite a bit from it. Yeah. In terms of the question, I think it's from what I find from a business point of view, is because everything's geared up more towards social media. It's got to the point now where unless it's wrapped up within a social media platform, people don't tend to respond so much. So you've got to think of new and imaginative ways of getting feedback through social media. So whether it's like posting an update saying, you know, this is what we've achieved, and then, you know, getting likes to show that people agree with it, or other means. I think that's what I'm getting at, and sort of it's kind of difficult to get your head around that whole kind of plethora of stuff.
Yeah. The thing is, it's all dependent on where your ideal customer hangs out. So, you know, as you'll know, if you're doing anything on social media and you're using it to try and reach your customers, you just need to know where they hang out. You know, like somebody like me, you'll laugh at me. My daughter's horrified, but you know, my customers are not on TikTok. Although I did that TikTok thing the other day, and I made myself a little bit of a video, and my daughter's like, Mum, you have to do a webinar on TikTok. You know, TikTok is not the platform for you. But it's true. It's about thinking about, you know, if I was going to collect feedback, I can get why you would use it. But if it's about collecting feedback, it's about me thinking about, okay, am I trying to reach people with a certain message and do that on, you know, for me, primarily it would be LinkedIn, Twitter, maybe a bit of Facebook. I've got a Facebook group. It's just thinking about who it is you're trying to reach and how best to reach them on that platform. You know, I'm sure you've probably had more talks, or there might be more planned, certainly through the webinar series, about how to use social media effectively for things like that. Or if there's not, maybe that would be a good topic actually. It's just thinking about, you know, where do your ideal customers hang out, and are those the platforms that are going to interact with you and give you the feedback that you want? Or actually, is it much more about, dependent on what your business is, you know, if it's a B2B business, it's going to be a lot easier for you to pick up the phone and get feedback from people, or just say, can you quickly, you know, reply to this email? Or actually, is it about doing surveys on SurveyMonkey or whatever? And sometimes you do want to distribute it on those channels, but I think it's going to be very, very dependent on who your customers are.
Yeah, I would just add there as well. I think that looking at when you post things on social media, rather than looking at how many people like it or share it or comment, if you've asked them to go and, you know, check out a new product that you've launched, or check out, you know, your kind of updated website, try and look at ways that you can measure that activity instead, because you really want to look at what actions they've taken. If you put a link in there, rather than looking at how many people have liked the post, look how many people have actually clicked through to the link, as a way of monitoring the success of that particular post. I'll just unmute you, Ram, just to see if you had any follow-up from that. Cool.
No, it's really good advice. Yeah, I mean that pretty much covers it, really. I think
Awesome.
It's quite a pertinent point, you know, given how important social media is at the moment.
Massively. We have got another kind of social media session in the works, which will be around Facebook and Facebook ads, but we're more than happy to look to put on kind of more general sessions as well around social media.
Brilliant.
And anybody?
I'm just putting the Calendly thing
in the chat. Yeah.
in the chat.
Anybody else with a question? I really like, David's gone now, but I really like David's comment about, even though the internet is an amazing library these days, it's still always and always will be better to talk to people who know their subject.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to say this because obviously I'm a subject matter expert myself. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine the majority of us in here have an expertise of some sort, and therefore that is of benefit to somebody. If you can work and access people that understand the sector or the context in which you're trying to work, it's really important. I mean, so often, I mean, I work with a lot of businesses that are transitioning from another sector, wanting to work, you know, with something I'm more familiar with, and just having that personal dialogue, and you will always be surprised how generous people are with their time. You know, that's one of the reasons why I've just thought, you know, just make it easy for people to have a 30-minute coffee with me. You know, it's not, there's no hidden agenda. It's just the case that I would hate for people to be wasting time going around loops and you know, going down blind alleys that we've all been in before. You know, people do want you to not have to go through some of the pain that they have. So there is normally an expert out there for everything that you want to do that is normally quite generous. I mean, that's beauty. You've got LinkedIn. You know, we've got LinkedIn. Those things weren't around when I first started, you know, professionally.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Well, I think that no more questions have come in, so I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. Big thank you from us to you, Bethan, for that session. That was awesome. I learned a lot, definitely, by having the examples so relevant to what we do. Yeah.
I do try to tailor them, which is to say, it's always difficult when you're doing it so well, one to many. But you know, this sort of topic of stuff around value, I could have